You're a disgrace to all of us, Arthur. Just look at yourself. Tyler Madson's voice erupted across the Cornerstone Cafe, echoing like a slap. Arthur McConnell remained seated, his wrinkled hands wrapped tightly around a coffee cup, eyes fixed on the table. His worn-out coat seemed to weigh even heavier on his thin shoulders. What no one there knew was that this quiet old man carried on his chest one of the rarest military honors of all, and a general was about to reveal it to everyone. Let's dive into this story. In Kentucky, mornings arrive slowly in Brooksville. The sun rises behind the mountains, casting a golden light over the rooftops. On the corner of Main Street and Roosevelt Avenue stood the Cornerstone Cafe, a gathering place since 1952. It had served 3 generations of workers, retirees, and veterans, coal miners who went underground before sunrise, farmers who worked the land with their bare hands, soldiers who returned from war carrying more than just luggage. The walls of the Cornerstone are covered in photographs faded by time, smiling soldiers posing before heading off to distant battles, military graduations where young men received their first decorations, welcome home ceremonies for those lucky enough to make it back. It's an informal shrine to the men and women who served when the country called. Dolores, 62, has been pouring coffee there for exactly 30 years. She knows each customer the way a mother knows her children. She knows Jim Miller takes his coffee black, no sugar, because he has diabetes. She knows Reverend Paul never orders a second cup because his wife says too much caffeine is bad for his heart. And she knows Arthur McConnell walks in every morning at exactly 7:15, sits at the same corner table by the window, and always orders the same thing: black coffee, whole wheat toast, and homemade strawberry jam. Arthur brings with him 3 objects that define his existence: a folded local newspaper, a gold pocket watch that once belonged to his father, a World War II veteran, and a quiet dignity that fills the space around him like a subtle perfume. The ritual never changes. Arthur carefully removes his coat and hangs it on the back of his chair. The military green fabric, faded by time and washing, looks far too big for his thin 75-year-old frame, as if it were made for a younger, stronger man, a man who once existed decades ago and still lives somewhere deep inside that silent chest. On the left side of his coat, there's a small embroidered patch few people ever notice. Its original colors have blended into the fabric, forming an almost invisible design. Only trained eyes can make out what it means. Arthur never talks about where he served, though his hands tremble slightly when someone brings up Vietnam. He doesn't share war stories like the other veterans at the cafe, men who turn every shot into an epic and every scare into heroism. He simply exists there, as steady as the sunrise, as quiet as a whispered prayer. Other patrons greet him with respectful nods that come from instinct. There's something about him that commands silent reverence, a dignity that never needs to be announced. Dolores always keeps his cup full without him asking, even when she's busy. Sarah Mitchell, the retired nurse who lost her husband in Iraq, always saves the local paper for him if he shows up late. Mike Thompson, the mechanic with grease-stained hands, always offers him a ride when the clouds hint at rain. Small gestures, simple courtesies, kindness that flows naturally, as if the whole town knew, somehow, that they were in the presence of someone special, someone whose stories were far too big to be held within the cafe's 4 walls. But no one ever spoke of it. No one asked him directly about his past, and Arthur never explained it himself, because some men carry the weight of glory they'd rather keep buried in the silence of their own hearts. Tyler Madson arrived in Brooksville 2 years ago like a storm that didn't know when to stop. A retired Army captain, he brought with him the arrogance of a man who never had to prove courage on the battlefield. He served 20 years in administrative posts, far from danger, far from the reality of war, far from the sound of bullets slicing through the air. Yet Tyler speaks as if he led entire divisions through minefields. His voice fills the cafe every morning, telling stories that grow bigger each time he repeats them. He considers himself the highest-ranking veteran in the place, and makes sure everyone knows it, even if no one asked. When I was a captain at Fort Knox, That's how most of his sentences begin, usually followed by tales of how he reorganized supply rooms or revolutionized filing systems that transformed the base's logistics. The other veterans listen out of politeness, but their exchanged glances say more than words ever could. Tyler dresses sharply, even for breakfast. His shoes shine like mirrors. He carries a genuine leather briefcase filled with documents no one needs to see, but that he loves to show off. Certificates, photos of him shaking hands with high-ranking officers. He always notices Arthur's clothes. That worn-out coat bothers him like a splinter in the throat. The older man's simplicity clashes harshly with Tyler's need for display. "How can someone leave the house looking like that?" Tyler mutters loud enough for others to hear, gesturing toward Arthur. "A veteran should take pride in his appearance. You honor the uniform even after retirement. You show that you served with distinction." Arthur never responds to the jabs. He keeps reading his paper, sipping his coffee with the patience of someone who's learned that some things shouldn't be rushed, living in a quiet dimension that Tyler simply can't understand. But Tyler takes the silence as submission, as proof of superiority, as validation for judging by appearances, and it feeds a dangerous confidence, the kind that grows like a malignant tumor. The remarks intensify as the days go by, comments about military standards and branch pride, observations about how some veterans let themselves go and don't carry themselves right, snide jabs about lost dignity and lack of self-respect. "Look at that old coat," Tyler says loudly one particularly cold morning, as frost clings to the cafe windows. "Looks like it came out of a trash bin. Can you believe a veteran would walk around dressed like that?" The cafe tightens like a violin string ready to snap. Dolores stops wiping the glasses, her hands trembling slightly. Arthur carefully folds his newspaper, slips the pocket watch into his coat. He finishes his coffee and places a few coins on the table. He always leaves a tip, even while living modestly after the financial toll of his late wife's medical expenses. Arthur stands slowly, his joints protesting with age. "You're a disgrace to all of us, Arthur. Just look at yourself." Tyler presses on, proud of the attention he's drawn. Arthur stops at the door, his hand resting on the cold handle. He turns slowly. His eyes meet Tyler's for a moment that stretches far too long. A moment weighted with stories Tyler couldn't begin to imagine. He says nothing. He simply walks out, the doorbell jingling behind him. Tyler smiles, pleased. He believes he's established dominance, believes he's put the old man in his place, believes he's shown everyone his superiority. He has no idea he just humiliated a man who carried more courage in his chest than Tyler could summon in 10 lifetimes. The Brooksville Veterans Memorial sits in a small town square, surrounded by century-old oak trees that have watched generations of soldiers leave, and only a few return. A modest red brick building, built in 1971 with donations from the local community. Inside, there's a library with solid wood shelves holding books on military history, biographies, and accounts of battles that changed the world. Photographs of local soldiers cover the walls like saints in a cathedral, young faces that left home full of hope and dreams. One entire wall is dedicated to those who never made it back, their names etched into bronze plaques that catch the soft light filtering through the tall windows. Every Saturday at exactly 8 a.m., Arthur arrives with a green canvas bag filled with homemade tools and cleaning supplies, all paid for from his own retirement check. The ritual always begins the same way. He adjusts the frames so they're perfectly straight. He alphabetizes the books, checks for pages damaged by moisture, repairs loose covers with clear tape. Each book is handled with reverence. On the main wall, he built a wooden shelf with his own hands where he places small vases of flowers. Always fresh flowers, changed every week. Arthur cleans each photograph individually, dusting them with the care of a surgeon handling a vital organ. He wipes the smiling faces of young men who left and never grew old, preserving their memories like cherished family heirlooms. He keeps cleaning, one by one, as if each face belonged to a brother lost along the way, because in a way they were all his brothers, bound by the shared experience of serving when the country called. It was November 11th. Brooksville's town square was decorated for Veterans Day, with American flags fluttering in the crisp autumn wind. A small stage had been set up in front of the memorial. Rows of chairs were lined up for the annual ceremony. Arthur arrived early. He sat in the last row, far right corner, almost invisible among the leafless trees. Tyler Madsen strutted around the square in a spotless uniform, greeting everyone as if he were the guest of honor. The mayor gave a speech about patriotism and gratitude. The local pastor offered a prayer for those who had served. The high school band played the national anthem with more enthusiasm than precision. General Robert Clark was the special guest that day. At 65, he had commanded troops in the Gulf, Panama, and Afghanistan. He knew what true heroism looked like. As he prepared to give his speech, his trained eyes scanned the small crowd. And then, he saw him. In the corner of the last row, an elderly man in a faded military coat. But it wasn't the coat that caught the general's attention. It was the small patch on the left side of the chest, faded by time, almost invisible from a distance. But General Clark knew that symbol. He had served alongside men who wore it. A few, a very few. He paused and set his prepared speech aside. Ladies and gentlemen, if I may, there is someone among us wearing the Medal of Honor, the highest military decoration in the United States, awarded only for acts of valor that go far beyond the call of duty. Tyler, already stepping forward, thinking the recognition was for him, froze mid-step. The general stepped down from the stage. He walked toward Arthur. The crowd stirred, murmuring in confusion. Arthur looked up, surprised. "With your permission," the general said quietly. Arthur nodded. General Clark leaned in to study the faded embroidery up close. Then he stood tall and saluted Arthur. One by one, everyone in the crowd rose to their feet, hands lifted in salute. Even the children, and not fully understanding, mimicked the adults around them. Arthur remained seated, calm, as always. Then, slowly, he stood and gave a respectful nod to the crowd. From that moment on, nothing felt ordinary anymore, because truth, when it finally reveals itself, has the power to change everything. Tyler Madsen couldn't sleep that night. The general's words echoed in his mind. Medal of Honor. How? The next morning, Tyler arrived at the Cornerstone Cafe earlier than usual. Arthur hadn't shown up yet. Tyler sat at a table near the old man's usual corner and listened quietly to the conversations around him. Sarah was telling Dolores about her grandson, Tommy, who had nearly drowned. Arthur jumped into that freezing water without a second thought. 75 years old, and he swam like a man in his 20s. He saved my grandson and vanished before the ambulance even got there. Mike chimed in. You all know he pays out of pocket to maintain the memorial, right? Seriously. Dolores stopped wiping the counter. And the flowers he puts there every week, that's him too, all from his own wallet. Tyler sat in silence, feeling the weight of his own arrogance. He remembered every cruel word he'd said about Arthur's clothes, every dismissive comment about the man's simple appearance. At 7:15 sharp, Arthur walked into the cafe. He made his way to his usual table in the corner. Dolores brought his coffee, just like always. Tyler watched his every move. This man had saved lives. This man kept the memory of fallen soldiers alive with his own money. This man served his community every day, quietly, without asking for anything in return. And Tyler had spent 2 years mocking him. He finished his coffee without touching the food, left $5 on the table, more tip than he'd ever left in his life, and walked out of the cafe with one single truth in his heart. Some mistakes are too big to fix with words, but you still have to try. At 10 a.m., Tyler knocked on the door of Arthur's small house, a simple wooden structure painted white with a front porch. No one answered. A neighbor, a man in his 60s watering plants in the garden next door, watched Tyler with curiosity. Looking for Arthur? Yes, I need to talk to him. On Saturdays, he's always at the memorial. He's probably there now. Tyler drove to the town square. The Brooksville Veterans Memorial looked different to him now. It wasn't just a red brick building. It was a temple, kept alive by the devotion of one man. He pushed open the glass door and stepped inside. Arthur was kneeling in front of the main wall, gently cleaning a photograph. He stood slowly, turned, and saw Tyler. "Arthur, Tyler searched for the words. "I came to ask for forgiveness." Arthur picked up another cloth and resumed cleaning the photos. "No need." "There is," Tyler said, stepping closer. "I spent 2 years humiliating you, thinking I was better. I thought I was the one who mattered most. But the truth is, I was standing in front of the greatest all along." Arthur paused, looked at Tyler. "I only did what needed to be done, and I still do." He turned back and continued wiping the photos. Tyler stood beside him, silently, respectfully. "Can I help?" Tyler asked. Arthur handed him a clean cloth. "Start on that side." The two men worked side by side for the rest of the morning, because sometimes the greatest lessons are the ones never spoken, and sometimes the greatest victory is turning an enemy into a friend, not through the power of force, but through the strength of example. If you believe that stories like this deserve to be valued and remembered, subscribe to the channel, because some legacies don't echo through applause. And if this story moved you, hit the like button and share your thoughts in the comments. Your opinion truly matters. It'll be a pleasure to read and reply to every message.